I think if it's one thing I helped come across over the years on this channel is how much I like RPGs. It's one of the few types of games that I always really fall back to. Not saying that I'm away from, any other genre. I actually play almost every genre of game out there, here and there. But games that I would always come back to were JRPGs. They were games that I could think about, the games that I could immerse myself in, and worlds that I could get into, which I couldn't really observe in real life, for example. There's no way you're getting anything like Final Fantasy kicking off in your everyday scenario, right? Now, growing up, there were always a few companies of JRPGs that would come to my mind. One of them would be Squaresoft. In fact, the only one would really be Squaresoft, who were pumping out games like Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger and Secret. Many games that I think a lot of people grew up with who would consider JRPGs was usually a Squaresoft production. There's obviously Enix, but they were really producing Chunsoft's Dragon Quest, which I had never ever gotten into in all my years. I think now might be the time, but there was always the other developer that never really made it to our side of the world. They were called Atlas at the time, and they still are called Atlas. I don't know why I really dug out of that, but Atlas would have created the Shin Megami Tensei series, which is the series that we're covering today. Now, Shin Megami Tensei was a game that was more grounded in reality, but not really. It was a game that had a much more darker tone to it than, something that you would find in Final Fantasy or something that you would find again in Dragon Quest or really any other JRPG. Now, what I'm about to mention over here is a game that's not necessarily scary, as in, like, say, an Nanashi No game or other horror games like that. It's not something that would carry out a Silent Hill type feel, or Resident Evil, or Call of Cthulhu, whatever you want to call it. Whatever you want to define as a general horror game, this game falls out of. What it does have, like those games, is a darker atmosphere to it, and that's something that I really wanted to cover. For an SNES game, it has quite possibly some of the most thought-provoking elements in it, and a game that has no, I guess you could say, restraint in how it's going to portray a darker, mature storyline. Now, you have to understand why this game never made it to our side of the world. Obviously, the whole idea is this game not releasing here, and there are huge reasons for that. Number one, this game is an SNES game, a Super Famicom game, so for it to come out over here, it has to comply by Nintendo of America's rules, and Nintendo of America at the time was very, very, very family-friendly oriented. Obviously, Nintendo would have censored it because, again, at the time, we would consider Night Trap or Mortal Kombat, and while it is laughable nowadays, looking at the fact that sprites of yesteryears was considered to be demonic or spooky in some way, shape, or form. Even Pokemon in many religious circles is considered to be some form of reference to devil worshipping or devil summoning. So when I give you a game that's all about devil summoning, devil fusing, becoming a demigod yourself, and fighting against God himself to create a free will society. Now, Shin Megami Tensei is a game that put Atlas on the map. This is their baby, and this is what spawned the Mega 10 franchise, which you might know more so in terms of Persona. In fact, Persona was a game that released on our side of the world before Shin Megami Tensei ever made its debut. Shin Megami Tensei only came to our side of the world in Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, which was for the PlayStation 2, and Shin Megami Tensei 4 came out on the 3DS, so obviously a society nowadays, 2017, 2010 and beyond, is a society where we're more tolerant of this kind of dark subject matter in games, and Nintendo included. But you have to put yourself back into that perspective. Persona was only allowed because Persona, while it does have the trademarks of Mega 10 gameplay, obviously combining, the press turn system, if you will, the one thing Persona had over this was it never really went into that dark subject matter. If anything about Persona, while it was dark, it was so contained within itself, and by that I mean it was surrounded with this high school relationship building mechanic, the whole confidant systems, and it wasn't really focusing on the whole fact of rebelling against God, if you will. It was only in Persona 5 where you get some hints of that. Obviously, I'm not going to give you any spoilers on it because the game is so fresh and new, but Persona is a much more lighthearted version of it. In fact, at times you can't even compare it to it. The Mega 10 games, there's so many of them. There's so many different kinds. You can go to Digital Devil Survivor. You can go to the 3DS strategy RPG / JRPG hybrid. You can go to so many different Mega 10 games which might have similar gameplay, but the dark subject matter, while it is present amongst all of them, you find it more heavy in Shin Megami Tensei, which is the mainline series. Now, I said Shin Megami Tensei 3 was the first game that had released on our side of the world. Shin Megami Tensei 1 and 2 are, as of today, Japanese exclusive, but I'm going to put an asterisk on that. Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne came out on the PlayStation 2. SMT1, SMT2 had several remakes that came out as time it went on. In fact, I believe there's a PlayStation version of the game, there's a Game Boy Advance version of the game floating around. Only until very recently did the original Shin Megami Tensei get an English release by Atlus, or rather an Atlus company that they hired to really port the Game Boy Advance version of the game. Yeah, basically, let me guide you through this. The game has its only North American, in fact worldwide release on the iPhone. So again, I was mentioning how Shin Megami Tensei wasn't exactly a horror game in the traditional sense earlier. What it is a game with really dark elements, and what I mean by that, if I can just mention in the first 10 minutes of the game even, you're witnessing things like human sacrifice, you're witnessing characters on crosses, you're witnessing these themes that hit you hard, themes that again wouldn't really be released so well in the early 90s when kids are playing Mario on these systems, if anything. And what I just mentioned, it only gets more intense from there. SMT ends up being one of those few games that really focuses on player choice, and player choice is a thing that's really important to me too. It's why I love games like Mass Effect. I like the idea of getting choice in my RPGs. You know, when I'm playing a role-playing game, I like to role-play. But SMT does it in a really interesting way, which is why I ended up making this video in the first place, why I was really passionate about this too, because a game like Mass Effect, or any game like that, any game that gives you choice, I find most of the times meters it out. What I mean is that they focus so much on the metrics that it almost feels like the idea of playing good and bad is sort of a spreadsheet. You know, you're doing good things to advance your good ranking, or bad things to really advance your bad ranking, and getting things that way. But what Shin Megami Tensei does is it doesn't really give you a good or a bad side. In fact, there is no good or bad side to this. In Shin Megami Tensei, there's a chaos side, there's a law side, and there is the neutral side. Now, none of these are ever really explicitly said as good or bad. In fact, there's more pluses and minuses to all these sides than anything. For example, you can side with law, which is siding with God in this 1,000-year kingdom, and there are pluses to that. You know, you get a heaven-like society, but at the end of the day, there's an authoritarian government really running it, and people get punished hard. Unless you believe in Abrahamic faiths, really, you're not really getting into the good graces of that society. But if you side with chaos, which is siding with Lucifer, then you go for free will, and free will can lead to chaos and ultimately bad things if you just let it go the way it is. Or you can go the neutral route, which is not siding with either of them, but this side ends up being very difficult, and you end up maybe losing more than ever having things to begin with. So none of these are ever really explicitly said as good or bad. You have to think about what you want as good or bad, and throughout the whole story, I actually sat there for periods not playing the game and thinking, do I really want to side with the bad side or the good side? There's pluses and minuses to everything. It's actually that thought-provoking choice that I don't really see too much happening in many different games. It's kind of like playing the Deus Ex games, more specifically their endings, where they give you this thought-provoking ending choice where you really have to think about how you want humanity to go, and Shin Megami Tensei does the same thing, but throughout the course of the game. It's not all tied to the ending. Now, coming from a Persona binge, ever since the release of 5, I've come to realize how important choice is when it's done right and done properly. You know, I'm not talking about the illusion of choice, but choice that, when you make it, can have the consequence you stick with to the very end, and I absolutely love it. It's what's slowly propelling me to love this mainline series more than the sub-series I actually grew up with. Now, the gameplay is a mixed bag. It's your standard JRPG, but this is before the franchise introduces the press turn system, which allows players to abuse weaknesses to gain extra turns, and so on and so forth. It still has a demon summoning in the earliest form possible to demon fusions, but it's a very early version of what the Mega 10 franchise would become to evolve in. So if you play the more recent games, you're going to find out that Shin Megami Tensei is a little bit more on the plain side. And not just plain side, it's also testicle crunching difficult too. If you don't spec out a character the right way or grind just enough and get used to exploiting weaknesses, you're going to have a pretty bad time. In fact, there's plenty of times I gave up on this video entirely because I just couldn't play the game, but I persevered after my 5th attempt of actually playing this game. Yes, the 5th attempt. And you have to get past a certain curve, I think. There's one boss, once you get past him, the whole game is basically steamrolling if you play it right. And once that happens, it's all gravy from there. Though what I can tell you is, while the game again isn't horror, the dark themes is really something you have to look forward to. And if what I'm saying right now isn't really getting to you, or it's not really getting the point across, then I think in truly haunted gaming fashion, we might just have to sit back, relax, and take a look at the spookier side of gaming in a more literal fashion. So, let's get out of just talking here and actually play this game.
Alright, so now that we're actually committed to playing this gem of a JRPG, allow me to reiterate. If you're going to play this game is testicle crunching difficult. You will not have an amazing time unless you really figure out the various intricacies to all of it. I mean, really, you gotta have some guides with you, okay? So alongside having a nice drink, get a guide. Trust me, it's gonna make it a lot more easier if you play it that way, okay? Don't have any shame in using a walkthrough or a guide for this game, trust me. If you don't know what you're doing and you want to experience a story, and you don't want to watch a Let's Play, have a guide with you. So the first thing you're going to do upon starting a new game is you get this dreamlike sequence where you automatically progress through and meet this law hero and the chaos hero. Of course, you don't meet them in real life yet, you're just meeting them in this dream state. You name them and you set the parameters for them, okay? Basically, you're setting all their stats. And again, this is very important. If you set these things up wrong, you're screwed for the rest of the game, at least in my opinion. So make sure when you're setting them up, you set them up properly. If they're strength-oriented or they're magic-oriented. Either if they're strength-oriented, put them in strength stats. If they're magic-oriented, put them in magic stats. So anyways, after that, you get to see this really, really saucy vision in the future, which you'd wonder why it wasn't released on this side of the planet. I mean, this is an SNES game. Your mom cock-blocks you in your dreams and you wake up and you flip on your computer and you download this demon summoning program. Again, let me tell you, if it's one thing I can't answer you is how this works, okay? I don't understand how we're summoning demons through our computers, okay? That needs an explanation, and I swear to God we don't really get an explanation in this game. Anyway, you go to this plain-looking mall and you find this man who gets his throat ripped out by a demon. Again, things escalate quickly. I don't understand sometimes why, but it happens. You do your errands and you head back, forgetting a man got his throat ripped out in the first place. You dream, and yet again you find a woman being sacrificed. Again, this is the second dream, and it's getting pretty fucked up from here. I don't understand what's going on with our main character's head, but okay. Now, one thing to note is, in the world map, you can enter numerous parts of Tokyo, right? Numerous districts. And that's kind of a thing about all the Mega 10 games, too, is Tokyo is a central location. You can always head to many places. But you'll notice that Tokyo is under some pretty heavy martial law, and it always keeps changing every now and then, so new areas open up, you can teleport from computer to computer. It's kind of a weird scenario, I must say. You head to this park where you meet an old man who projects you into this dream world, and you come across a man performing demonic rituals using a computer. Again, we need a better explanation, but okay. You end up failing the first round, and the game sends you back, and it tells you aren't really ready. So, you go home, because you're not ready to take on a fight, but guess what? The cops bust you, and you go to a prison. But you find out that this prison is really like this hospital where, like, rituals are being performed. Not really rituals, but the doctor is like this really crazy man performing said rituals, and it's the same doctor that you end up losing your first round to and getting teleported out of. So you end up kicking their ass. But the cool thing about this prison is you find the law hero who's in the prison with you. Alongside the law hero, you're meeting what I believe to be Stephen Hawking. Now, I don't know if this is Stephen Hawking exactly, but it's a Stephen in a wheelchair who's a total genius, a computer expert prodigy, if anything, and the Stephen apparently figures out how to summon demons through a program into our world, okay? Again, explanations aren't given. It's one of those things that I can actually fault this game for. But you find out that the Japanese Self-Defense Force commander, Gatao, is using the program to mass summon demons to do his bidding. And you should probably stop him, but at the same time, this is also where the law, chaos, and neutral paths come into play. Do you want to stop him, or do you want to hear him out and maybe side with the character? You know, it's one of those things you got to think about, the whole philosophical part of this. Now, Steven sent the program out to everyone because, you know, Gatao's using it to mass summon demons, and unfortunately, even though you sent it out to a bunch of people, not many people have command over summoning demons entirely. So you being one of the few of them, and a couple other, you being the few actually, you being the exception to the rule, are put up against it. So you have this whole thing with you that you gotta use this demon summoning program to save Tokyo. You gotta save the world. So you go back to the same mall you saw a man's throat being ripped out of, and you find out that's where the Chaos Hero is, getting beat up by a bunch of second-rate gang members. You pick them up, you head back home, only to find out that the demon actually ate your mother and killed her. Again, things escalate really, really fast. It's like we're playing fast forward in the land of emotions. So then you head to this bar in Shinjuku where you meet a resistance leader who's fighting off against this whole demon craziness. They get kidnapped, you end up saving them of course, and then you're tasked with talking to Gateau and American Ambassador Thorman. So now you got these two people. Law is American Ambassador and Chaos would be Gateau. So this is where you decide which path you want to take, and this is where the philosophical stuff is, where I was mentioning earlier. Do you want to side with good or evil, or what you consider to be good or evil, right? Do you want to side with the Chaos era, which is both plus and minus in certain aspect, or do you want to side with Law, which is the true kingdom of God? There's both positives and negatives to it as well. You have to think what you want. Now, I myself sided with Gateau, which is the Chaos side, because I wanted to see the free will side of it, and just because I'm generally a heathen in my own little way. You can choose to actually not side with either of them and go the totally neutral route, but I decided to pick one route specifically because I really wanted to see what one massive route had in comparison to the entire thing. So I picked the Chaos route for this run, and I might go back to the game and play the Law side as well. You know, there are different sides you can pick, and the actions you have consequences, so multiple playthroughs are very much appreciated if you're into the game, and you can deal with the nuances. Now, again, no route is ever mentioned as good or bad. Again, judge for yourself. You don't even have to take the same one I did. So because I chose Gateau, I had to go back to the American Ambassador, and I had to beat him in a really, really pathetically easy boss battle that only lasted like 4 turns. I swear maybe I was over-leveled or something, but it was at this point and past that I noticed the game kind of got a little easier. You know, I guess I jumped over the hurdle a little too higher, or I leveled up to the point where the game wasn't really posing a challenge, and maybe that's for the worst, and that's usually how I play RPGs, which is kind of bad if you think about it. But anyways, once you beat this character, you find out that God, and I want you to stick with me for a second, God uses America as a proxy, okay, to send nuclear ICBMs to Japan and wipe the country because of the whole demon shit. Japan is gone, toast, the world is over. I'm not kidding with you. Apparently at this point, God uses many natural disasters and nuclear weapons and whatever devastating things we have in our society and wipes out a majority of humanity over all this demon stuff. It happens. I'm not kidding with you. When shit escalates quickly, this game has now entered Fallout territory. We are now in the post-apocalyptic era of Shin Megami Tensei. What we had just witnessed up to this point, I would say 4 or 5 hours of gameplay, was basically a prologue to what is really the true story. And if you think that's bad, Japan getting nuked yet again by America, which is odd coincidences, mind you, it gets even darker. God himself smiting the earth because of us summoning a bunch of demons and creating general anarchy amongst ourselves because of it. So a whole war has happened, the world has been blown up, and that's about it.
Now, if you've noticed one thing, I've been pretty off the cuff this video, and I've basically been sort of unscripted, scripted to an extent, and it's because I had a lot of things to cover. I had to introduce the Mega 10 franchise, Shin Megami Tensei, the whole element of choice, and the various dark themes, and distinguish why I wasn't really covering a horror game. While this isn't a traditional horror game, it is a game with very dark elements, and a game that never really made it up here to our side of the world at the time it was released, just due to the fact that there would have been a lot of social issues against it. But because of the fact that I've been personally getting into it, I didn't want to make a let's play type video. I don't want to make haunted gaming sort of very simplistic like that. So I wanted to combine a bit of the analytical perspective with actually playing the game as well, because I feel like I want to play this game, and I have played this game, and I want to give you my experiences to it as well. But at the same time, really analyzing it and almost summarizing properly what is this game. So what you just witnessed was the first part off the cuff mentioned throughout it. It's a game that I played, you know, while I was doing this analysis as well, and I just wanted to give you the jot note version of it entirely, while also interjecting and really pointing out the key points of why I find Shin Megami Tensei 1 to be an interesting game to cover. Now, I'm going to gauge interest to see how many people really like this video and if part 2 and 3 will be a thing, but for sure they will be a thing. I'm just going to gauge interest on what people want. There's many other things that are coming in Haunted Gaming, and it's not just Shin Megami Tensei or games in particular. It goes even beyond that. Let me know what you think. Let me know how you feel about this episode. It's different. I think every Haunted Gaming so far in the new series has been a little different every week, and I've been experimenting as much as I can, and I don't intend to make this series stale in my opinion, because I do enjoy how we're making it, and I do enjoy the whole production as well, and I generally have been liking making these videos, and it's been a breath of fresh air to do it. It's a lot more intensive work, but it's work that I enjoy doing, and I hope that enjoyment is coming across to you people. So, that being said, I'm going to end the video where it's at. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. This is me, Mutahara, and I am out.